Hello, this is Tyler White. Today we are going to do our three-part video series covering the production of a spindle, a hearthboard, and a bow for a bow drill. This video is going to cover the spindle. All right, so let's get to work. Because of the fact that I can't travel around the country and get you plant types in every state, which I wish that I could do, because of that, I'm going to talk about the attributes that you're going to look for in the plants as opposed to specific plant types. Now, I'm using cottonwood. Cottonwood grows all over the US. You can use that. But more importantly, the reason why I'm using cottonwood is because it's soft. If you want to know if it's soft enough to use, what you need to do is expose underneath the bark material to this hardwood. Then run your thumb across it and see if you can leave a mark. If you can leave a mark in the wood, and if it is dead, standing, and gray, so it's not a green material, then it's ideal for making a bow drill. Now, instead of doing one giant video where we just dedicate the time to doing all the bow drills, I'm going to focus on just one part at a time. Today we're doing the spindle. Now, when selecting the material, the best thing to do is find the straightest chunk that you can. I'm looking right in between these two at this chunk. This doesn't mean that I couldn't make a small spindle out of this piece, because you can always cut a banana straight. The way that you do that is you make a straight line and you just remove the material above that. And as it spins, it'll make a point. So just because you can't find the most perfect and ideal straight piece doesn't mean that you can't still use it. However, you're going to save yourself a lot of time and effort if you just look harder and find a good straight piece to begin with. I've done that in this piece. Now again, the part that I'm looking at is essentially between those two. You can start out with a really long piece, and then as you use it, it will shrink. If you're a new person or a beginner with the bow drill, try to get something about that length from the bottom of your foot to the top of your knee, because it'll give you the ability to lean right here and give good amounts of pressure as you're running the bow drill. That doesn't mean that you can't run a bow drill that has a spindle that's only 4 inches long. So do understand that as you do fire, you're going to grind your spindle down. And as you grind your spindle down, eventually you'll need to make a new kit. Usually the hearthboard will run out, maybe you'll go through about 2 hearthboards before you do 1 spindle, but it just depends. The key takeaway here though is, if you can, get your spindle material from the exact same tree that you get your hearthboard material. In my other video, I'm going to show you the hearthboard, but with this, I had a big fat trunk that I took the hearthboard out, and above it I had a limb that I'm taking the spindle out. So it's literally the same tree on the same branch. The reason that you want to do this is because it guarantees the age and it guarantees the denseness or the thinness of the material. I've tried juniper on cottonwood because I found a piece of wood that worked for a cottonwood hearthboard, and I didn't find anything for the spindle. And then I tried the juniper spindle on the cottonwood, and I was unsuccessful because that harder wood drilled a hole right through the baseboard. So it's really important to match it up. You can make bow drills out of hardwoods. Just make sure that it's hardwood on hardwood or softwood on softwood. There are some mixtures of different types of woods that will still work, but to make your life easier, same stick, same branch, just deal with it that way until you become advanced. So let's talk about carving or straightening this out. The first thing I'm going to do is, I see the bend here. I could probably get a spindle out of here, but I'm going to remove this piece. Just take that out so that it's not part of my spindle. Now, if we understand what is going on with wood, essentially you have outer bark, you have fibers called the cambium layer, you have hardwood and harder wood in the center. So understanding that, if you just spin and chop yourself in a circle, you'll eventually be able to pop it, because all that I did was I removed those fibers that would create dynamic resistance, and then I just popped that centerpiece. This can be a future small spindle for me, so I'm gonna save it for later. Now, I'm gonna do this to the other side. I'm looking at, right here is my spindle. Maybe right there. So cut it long. You can always shave it shorter later. Don't underdo it. Now let's say you don't have a hatchet. Let me kind of cover that real quick. So if you don't have a hatchet, give yourself a reverse grip with your knife, put it against your chest, and we're gonna do the counterlever technique. Essentially the way that that works is, again, I'm cutting the fibers on the outside and I'm just pulling my shoulder blades together right on my ribs, okay? So looking at where these fibers are, I cut in and down in a circle. And this chest lever technique gives me a lot of leverage, okay? And I'm just basically cutting those fibers, and this is called a rose cut. So once I've got that cut, it just pops. Nice and easy. Now I've got the center core piece for my spindle. I've got 3 different tools. I've got my axe, I've got my knife, and I've got a smaller knife. It just makes my life easier. That's kind of the ideal setup. You can do all of this with either the axe or the medium or the small knife. You don't have to do it with all 3. It just takes different techniques for each one. Okay, when it comes to cutting this spindle, try to cut it the direction that it grows. I'm gonna flip it upside down. So the reason why is if I start running my axe like this against the little nubs that pop out there, it'll turn in along the fibers and it will cut into what I don't want it to cut. So I'm gonna flip it upside down, take off all of these little nubs. Notice that I'm cutting away from my knees, not gonna cut my legs, holding it high so that I won't cut my fingers. And I like to use the axe to take care of the big chunks, and I do the majority of my creating with an axe or a hatchet. Then, as I get past these big chunks, I'll smooth it all out with a knife. Try to keep your axe out of the dirt, because in the dirt is rocks. Rocks will destroy your blade tip. Okay, and usually I like to lay a log down to cut there if I can. All right, so we got the big chunks taken off. Now I'm gonna skin it. Let's go ahead and take all that off. You don't want any bark on your spindle. The bark kind of eats into your friction and makes it hard to deal with.
There we go. Get all that bark off. Get to the hardwood.
Sharp knife goes a long way. You're more likely to not cut yourself with a sharp knife than you are with a dull knife, because a sharp knife takes so much less effort to process wood with. Here's another thing too to think about while you're doing this. You're gonna naturally have a thinner part and a thicker part as you create this spindle. Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell, but for the most part you can tell. This is gonna be my thicker part, or thinner part. This is gonna be my thicker part. So as I go, I want to remember that the thinner part is gonna be on top. And once I start creating this spindle, I wanna remember that the idea is thin means less friction. Less friction is what we want on the top, so that whatever's going on the top of that spindle doesn't create fire before it's created on the bottom. Use that little chest lever technique again. Okay, starting to clean it right up. Now, I said cut it in the direction that it grows, which I stand by, but you can also cut up if you're a little more careful, just to remove material and be just fine. The other thing too that I like to do is use the back of my knife, and that will remove just these little chunky pieces that are kind of getting in my road. You can have, depending on the spine of your knife, a soft spine or a harder spine, and ends up being a good material removing tool. Now we're going to take the last little chunks off here. We've got some knobs there to get rid of. I keep this right against my body because I won't slip, I won't fling and cut stuff, and that protects me. All right, so I've got the very basic part of the spindle cut. The next thing I need to do is the shaping. What I like to do is to put my thumb on the top and put my chin right down there and look at it. It gives me the ability to tell that I've got a curl here. I need to take away material on this side. And as I turn it, I need to take away some material in the middle. So what I'm going to do is try to cut this straight. If I can't cut this straight, then it's going to wobble as I run it through the bow drill, and that's an absolute fail. All right, so we're going to finish cutting this straight. The way that I want to do that, specifically on the top, is that chest lever technique again, so that I can really dig in and remove material. I'm going to make that point. Now, as I make this point, it's going to kind of naturally have that hardwood in the middle. I want to balance it, so I want to make sure that I'm focusing on that as my center. Let's clean up this other side. And I'm looking for skinny like a pencil on top, fat like a crayon on bottom. But I still need a point on both sides, because the point on the bottom is what's going to start my bow drill for the burn end. The point on the top is what's going to float and keep my bow drill from creating too much friction up here. So I've got kind of a fat bottom here. I like it. As I cut it, it'll start to create this ridge right here, and I want to prevent that usually. So I will just run around that in a circle, because that ridge can tend to build up and hang on things, especially when you're dealing with the top of the bow drill. So I'm going to make this much more pointy. Kind of go in a circle, kill that second ridge line. Nature has a tendency to put knots always where you want to cut. It is what it is. And then I'm going to go higher and cut the next ridge line off. All right, now the last thing I want to do is kind of test it, right? So if I spin it on something, it's got a little bit of a wobble. And I noticed that with that little bit of a wobble, I can see where I need to remove material. I need to remove material on this knot right here. You can see, looking down it, that I've got a fat spot right here. Trim the fat a little bit. And I can see that I've got a fat spot right here. The more you can be a perfectionist about getting this straight, the more success you're going to have when you actually run the bow drill. So work hard in the beginning so that it's easy later on. Okay, that will work. So essentially what I have done is taken cottonwood, took a big chunk for the hearth board, took a big chunk for the spindle, and I've created a spindle. The reason why this is so big is because I'm going to get a lot more leverage on it. When I run the bow drill, I want my string to be at the halfway point or lower. If I have bulges down here, it's going to rock and roll and move. There's nothing wrong with trimming like a slight hourglass, a little piece of material right here that will help you. I don't need that. I don't prefer it anymore because I can control the walking of my string as I run the bow drill. But if you're a beginner and you want to help contain the location of your string, just trim some stuff right around that lower part. But do understand, as your spindle shrinks, it's going to shrink from the bottom up. That's going to change the position of where that piece is. All right, guys, I hope this was valuable for you. There's going to be a couple other videos that will give you how to make the hearth board and how to make the bow. So go check those out, and thank you for watching.